Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was announced a few days back, and with it began the onslaught of speculation that's going to be with us until the game releases in September 2022, assuming there are no delays. Hey everyone, this is Yggdrasil. In my last video, I gave quick thoughts on a handful of initial things I personally noticed, missing quite a few key points of interest. In my rush, I released the video shortly after Xenoblade Chronicles executive game director Tetsuya Takahashi put out a statement with other key facts regarding the game's background and development. This video is not only going to be addressing those details that I glossed over or skipped entirely, but I will also be bringing up many points of speculation and fan theories that are prevalent in the community right now, and I will be bringing up my own personal opinions of each one. That being said, I am going to be using the names for characters this time around, and reference both Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. If you have any reservations about spoilers or want to complete these games yourselves before the release of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, this is not the video for you. If you are staying, well, hello friends! I hope you'll find this video amusing, and if you do, consider subscribing to my channel, liking the video, and letting me know what are your opinions in the comments below. One final note, the Xenoblade series pulls from and is alluded to have many ties and motifs with both Xenogears and Xenosaga, other titles from Monolith Soft. And while I have no doubt there will be many tie-ins with those two series, I am no expert in those games, and I have not played them either in full, so I cannot give those concepts much justice. Instead, I'd like to direct you to YouTuber Enel, who is well versed in the Xeno series, having multiple world records for speedruns in many of the games, as well as probably the best in-depth guides you can find for Xeno content. You can catch his video of his thoughts regarding Xenoblade Chronicles 3 trailer in the link provided in the description below. I'll also direct you to YouTuber Luxon, who is known for his immense speculation videos concerning the lore and finite details of Xenoblade Chronicles. He did an extreme video spanning the length of almost an hour and a half of his own analysis of the trailer, and I would highly recommend giving that a look as well. With all that said, finally, let's get into the video. First, I did not bring up any of the characters or factions that they are associated with. I mostly focused on environmental details, so I guess you could say my first video was more of an impression video than an actual analysis. Well, let's get in and start with those factions and then move on to the main characters. In this new world we will be exploring, called Ionios, the people are seemingly split into two factions at war with one another. Ionios directly translates from Ion as everlasting, a key symbolism of life. I'll get into that more later. Keves is a nation where mechanical technology is highly prevalent, sporting many combat vehicles in their army. Meanwhile, Agnes is a nation rich with ether, a natural mystic force akin to the concept of magic in other RPGs. Ether can take on many forms and has been seen and given physical, solid, and liquid forms in both Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The forces of Agnes specialize in ether combat and rely on autonomous technology using ether proficiently. It seems to me that Keves represents styles and concepts involved with Xenoblade Chronicles 1, while Agnes is portrayed with the styles and concepts carried by Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It is my assumption then that the knowledge of each game will help you to understand some of the history of each faction. A tweet by Nintendo of America shortly after the trailer's release described Keves as being generally clothed in black and with a mech fantasy, while they also described Agnes as being clad in white and proficient with ether combat. One last note of interest is that Keves and Agnes are Hebrew and Latin respectively for the word lamb. Monolith Soft sure loves their Christian references, and there are an absolute plentiful amount of them in all of their games. Among the 6 characters that we've been introduced to by a first name basis, they are known to be 3 of Keves and 3 of Agnes. All character designs so far have been attributed to Masasuga Saito, who worked on designs for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I know much of the community is comforted by their choice to go with more tame designs this game as compared to the previous title. And if there's less discourse in the game for it, then sure, I'm game. Alright, well let's start with our Keves group, shall we? First, we have the first character presented, Noah, who is described of having the role of soldier, as well as that of an off-seer, a person who mourns for soldiers who have lost their lives on the battlefield. While we aren't exactly sure what that means and likely won't until more information comes out, Director Takahashi strongly stated that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 places great emphasis on the concept of life, as represented with the focus on the flute that both Noah, Mio, and other characters perform with in the trailer. Perhaps that is tied with the role of being an off-seer, In any case, I really enjoy this guy's design, and I'm sure loving that sword, huh? It really reminds me much of the one that Shulk created for his use on the journey towards Biona's shoulder during the Future Connected storyline. One largely popular speculation is that Shulk's love for technology blossomed into many of the designs and creations prevalent in the society of Keves, and I am inclined to agree. I'll be pointing out more similarities as we come across them in the video. One last note for him for now, and alluding to how I brought up Keves and Agnes, translate into Lamb, is the obvious Noah's Ark reference. The most optimistic outlook being that Noah is going to embark on a journey that will save both factions. I'm sorry, I had to. Anyway, the most pessimistic outlook would be then that they are lambs for the slaughter, or sacrifices, as seen commonly depicted in the Bible. Next up is Lance. Only described as one of Noah's allies, he wields a great sword that doubles as a shield. Again, if this country's technology is largely inspired from Shulk's inventions, this weapon archetype could be modeled after the Driver Garter series that Rhine used. The metallic skin tone reminds me of the Machina race from the first game, and the grooves on his arms may seem to support that. So a new generation of half Homs, half Machina could very well be prevalent among the people of Keves. How? I don't know. Science, I guess. There is some speculation he could be Indoline, but with him being tied to Keves, I'm more inclined to believe that he is related to one of Xenoblade Chronicles 1's races. That's all I really gotta say for him as of now. The third Keves character is Yuni. She's described as being a childhood friend to both Noah and Lance. She seems to be a half Homs, half Hyentia, as indicated by the small pair of wings adorning her head. She's known to have a cheeky, outspoken, and crude personality that you can hear her throwing out some rather creative PG cursing in the trailer. In any case, I'm quite smitten with her design, as there are many other people who are also doing that. In fact, Enel has already claimed her, so I guess I'll just have to look somewhere else. Her weapon of choice seems to be a mashup of two of Xenoblade Chronicles 1's weapons, Melia's staff and also Charla's ether rifle. This likely indicates that she could perform the role of either an ether-based ranged DPS or as a healer, much like how Lance could be an offense or defense character based on his sword shield stance. One thing I want to bring up, putting all these characters together, is a common theme in all their designs. That would be the blue circular patterns on parts of each of their characters' clothing. It's most commonly noted with Yuni's belt, very similar to the one Shulk wore in Future Connected, which he presumably used to charge up his replica Monado. The same circular pattern can also be found on Noah's greaves, as well as all over Lance's coat, greaves, and weapon. The circle is also noted on some of the backs and other belts of the other characters shown early on in the trailer, so I'm going to assume that most, if not all, characters wearing this pattern are associated with the Keves military. And this only further shows just how much Shulk's enhanced Machina technology has expanded into much of what Keves uses in the modern day. Now with the Keves trio out of the way, let's hit up the Agnes trio. We first have Mio, the other protagonist of the story, as described by Nintendo. She's a soldier of Agnes and is also given the role of Offseer, similar to Noah, and she has her own flute. In one of the quick transition scenes in the trailer, I presume she and Noah actually give one another each other's flutes. Perhaps as a sign of trust, as evidenced by the other image in which Noah is playing with a different flute than the one he first used. This gives us the hint that the Offseer title is not unique to either faction, a little something to keep in mind. Now in my earlier quick analysis video, I confused this character as being the same one revealed towards the end of the trailer, but her name is very clearly presented as Mio by Nintendo, despite extreme similarities between the two of them. Notably, Nia and Mio are both plays on the sounds cats make, and their short gray hair and their use of their chakram weapons made them pretty hard to distinguish initially for most people. Most notably, she has a core on her chest, indicating that she is part blade, perhaps a flesh eater like Nia. If she is indeed her own separate character apart from Nia, I'd hazard a guess that blades are far more integrated in the culture of Agnes than they were in some of the countries of Xenoblade 2. Maybe in a way where they could proliferate among the human societies and have children of their own with them. Who can say? That's just my hunch. One last thing I want to bring up is her design. I brought this up in my earlier video, but I still cannot stress how much I love the Tornin inspiration in her designs, from the multiple sashes on her person, down to the golden hued meshes on the steel-like boots she wears. She's really best girl in my eyes so far. Now this strapping lad, the HB, the star of the show, ladies and gentlemen, he is Tion. He is regarded as a tactician fighting alongside Mio, using his smarts and keen insight to help out on the battlefield. From his sleek design to his role as a tactician, Tion is already shaping up to be an awesome character. He fights by controlling this drone-like origami that have some writing on their back. I'm unsure of what to call the weapon type itself, but I personally believe that they are either ether-fueled drones in the shape of origami, or they are actually origami pieces, and he's somehow imbuing ether into them. Either way, it's a pretty new and interesting way to fight compared to the other weapons that we've seen so far in the trailer. They also remind me of a Napon when they're standing up as depicted in Tion's main character art. The last character introduced to us is Senna, again a soldier of Agnes working alongside Mio and Tion. Despite her petite figure, she wields immense physical strength, and while the small character with a big weapon trope is nothing new, I just love her design completely. She reminds me of a mix between Bridget of Cassandra, and why wouldn't she, because she is a blade. The pure blue core on her chest shows that. She wields a shield hammer, a weapon type found in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but let's just hope they've learned from their lesson and actually make them more viable this time around, huh? One last thing I want to bring up with these characters for now is that, as discussed earlier, Keva's units are often described as clad in black, while Agnes units are clad in white. And I can't really see that all too much in these characters, aside from their shoes really. That said, I'm going to exempt them from that trope largely because A, they are the main characters of a friggin' JRPG, they have to look different and cool and awesome. And B, I didn't really see anyone really talking about this, but the characters wear different clothing in multiple images in the trailer. This indicates that we are either going to see some clothing swaps throughout the course of the story, or that we are reverting to the fashion gear style of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, where different pieces of gear actually have physical difference, and the characters aren't in just one uniform all the time. I assume that we can wear fashion gear over our actual gear, like in both Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles X, to suit the player's aesthetics if true, and I'm 100% here for that, if that is the case. Especially after costume changes were largely not available in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, aside from only a small handful. Now I talked about people we know, so I'm going to speculate on people we don't know. First off, beginning with this big guy, with a big gruff voice that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 fans will undoubtedly recognize, there are three main theories of who this character might be, and I'll start with the most common, that being that this guy is just going to be named Vandam. Every Xeno series game has a Van something or other in their game, Van Dam or Vanguard being the most common. He's a loudmouth fighting type, with a scar on him or some such. It's a staple and the story behind it is actually quite interesting, but this guy may well just be it, and an interesting note is while not the same race as his preceding Vandam from the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 game, this guy has the same hairstyle, same facial scar, and the same voice actor as him presumably. The two other theories I've seen is that this guy is either an aged up Rex or Zeke. Both of these characters from the second game are likely to have extended lifespans due to their own circumstances, and the small bit of scar peeking out of this guy's shirt, unless that's a trick of the light, not to mention the eye patch with an insignia on it, makes me heavily lean towards it being Zeke. But if that's the case and he is Zeke, where's Pandoria? One last theory, and this is more or less just a hunch of mine, is simply leaning into the fact that this guy has a dark getup, ergo he is on the Keva's side, which would lower the chance that it's either of the two. Heck, it might even play into my own theory that if it is Rex, he's continued on the merc life of his former mentor Vandam, taking his name as his own, and working as a merc without regards to either major faction. Again, just my own theory, thought I'd get it out there. On the next screen we have another presumed Offseer playing with the flute. Based on the flute's design, the character's dark clothes, and the blue lit belt, this is undoubtedly a character associated with Keva's. There are four main points I want to bring up about this character. First, most notable, is the hair. The hair color and style almost completely match that of Shulk and Fiora's. The second thing I want to bring up is the flute. It is almost identical to the one that Noah uses, so we can assume that the flutes are standard issue among Offseers. 3. Notice the monolith-like symbol on the left hand of the character. I'd like to bring this up now that many people, myself included, originally believed that only Keva's characters had them on their body. Noah on his right hand, Yuni on her chest, Lands on his chin, and this character on their left hand. However, the Agnes trio have also been spotted to have them as well, with the exception of Tion, presumably because it is hidden by his clothes. Mio has it on the right side of her neck, and Senna has one as well, seen in clips in the trailer. This is a detail I'm going to link to something else later on. And the fourth thing I want to bring up is the cube-like motes of light floating around the character. These lights appeared around Noah as he was performing at the start of the trailer too, indicating that the song played by the Offseers will be more than just sentimental. Perhaps it rouses the ether around them in some sort of way. If it's true, then why are these almost gold-like compared to the light blue ones that floated around Noah? The next scene after this character shows both Noah and Mio playing the flute side by side, but notably, Noah is playing with another flute while Mio is using Noah's. From the next clip after, where the two are holding their flutes, it almost appears as if they are exchanging them with one another. A show of trust perhaps after their bout earlier on and in the trailer. I also want to point out in this image where the two are located. To me, they almost look to be standing by the Great World Tree of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 on the cliffs of Mortha. It might be a little strange to consider this, considering that the tree collapsed at the end of the game. But perhaps the base of the tree itself was spared and allowed to survive, and some organic remnants sprouted and continued to live. It may just be the angle playing tricks on me, and I know there's another large tree to the right hand side, but this image just screams Cliffs of Mortha to me. So that's my theory. The key part here, however, is the voice line around this time can be heard with the voice actor who played Rex in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, saying, "You can try to move forward together." Many assume this to be straight up Rex, but it's been discovered that it actually is Noah saying this line. What he says is otherwise very vague and could be interpreted in a few ways, so I'd rather not get into it without more context. So let's move on. In the next clip, we have Tion presumably fighting against Yuni, yelling, "They're not your friends anymore, they're his fuel." There's wild speculation in this one line, many of it related to Xenogears lore, but I said I won't be using anything that isn't specifically within the current known breadth of Xenoblade. So let's try and make sense of it with that limited scope, shall we? My prediction is that Tion, as a member of Agnes, is telling Yuni, a member of Kev's, that there is a third party that can mind control Kev as citizens, or basically anyone that's selected by this third party, and it's essentially already too late to stop them, even if they don't realize it yet. Now let's get on to the vistas presented in the trailer. I touched up on a couple of them in my previous trailer analysis, but I want to give them even more justice this time around. The very first area presented is reminiscent of Bionis' leg from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. The hill-like formations at the very top of the image are perhaps the greatest contribution to this assessment. Keep in mind that in this game we only explored the right leg of the Bionis, so this could either be a mesh of continental masses with parts of the Bionis legs involved, or a future version of either legs themselves. The next image, and the one I am absolutely gushing about the most, is Noah running along some rusted metal grating. I didn't remember the name of the secret area at the time, but it is the Distant Fingertip secret area, found all the way at the top of the Fallen Arm in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Many players remember that iconic long climb up the grates and being greeted with such a nice view. Well, in this shot, the grating is practically identical, although the surrounding landforms have changed drastically. Whereas the Fallen Arm was surrounded by water on all sides, this video shows just how many landmasses have smashed up against the area. The most notable part of these landmasses then is the snowy terrain and the teeth-like formations in the top left. The way the formations are structured gives off the impression that this is the Orion Titan, and I have a large feeling that the Orion Titan and the Mechonis Sword will be visible in a handful, if not most, of the maps of the game. The main set pieces of both Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 show us a key location that our party will traverse, and while I cannot say much for exploring the Vertical Sword, exploring the ruins of Araya by entering from the Wound sounds more plausible, and it is likely where the cast is going to uncover something that's going to cause them to change their views or discover something that they would otherwise not have known if they chose not to journey there. That being said, the sword itself still housed large ether funneling labs and military complexes, so it's quite possible that someone or something could tap into anything left behind in those buildings. This next area is more of a barren wasteland area, and one I initially skipped, much to my dismay because this is actually also a part of the Fallen Arm. The Distant Fingertip landmark can even be seen in this image. In both the image and the one of the Distant Fingertip landmark, you can see glowing floaty spheres on the sides, indicating that these are overworld collectible items. This hints to us that we will be collecting items one at a time as we did in both Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles X, as opposed to the collection points in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 that we use to gather multiple resources at once. While some may personally be off-put by this reversion, I quite enjoyed the collectopedia that Xenoblade Chronicles 1 had. Yeah, even the Black Liver Bean and Fossil Monkey. So, sure, I don't mind. Next up is an image of lands running through another barren wasteland, maybe in the same region as the previous scene, moving along a large mechon-like structure. It's interesting to note that the face is shut off, as well as one other point I will bring up later on. We're then followed up with a scene of Senna running in a large metallic town, with what looks to be residential buildings to the side, and some weird claw-like contraption and an ether lamp to the left. These are very clearly assets similar to those that were found throughout Mechonis, and hints at very strong Machina influence. Thus, we can assume that this is a Kevis city. Whether this city will be a side town remains to be seen. There are no NPCs or anything really in the ground, so I either assume that they were removed to offer us a better view of the vista, or that the town itself is a ghost town, or something has happened to its residents. We're then followed up with Yuni running toward an offline mech again, similar to the one that Lance ran past previously. The key difference in this design is that it clearly is portrayed as an Agnes mech. It is clearly still powered like the other mech, but not active. Next, we have another large machine in the center of this foggy area. The fog itself is extremely consistent with the fog of Satoral Marsh. The machine is active, and I'll get into that right now. Almost every piece of technology shown in this trailer, character weapons included, have a half circle or full circle in them. This can be seen in almost all the character weapons, and large bulks of the mechs from both factions. In fact, the two offline mechs earlier that appear otherwise functional have an inactive circle, which is what seemingly indicates that they are offline. While we obviously don't know what this could mean, it could very well be an influence from a time perhaps before the two factions were against one another, and perhaps shared some ether-based technology with one another. Or this could be influence from a third party like I've been thinking, who knows. Next up is an area far unlike anything else we've seen in the game so far, involving large circular floating pillars of Earth. We also got a shot of Mio having herself a grind towards one of those pillars. It's a little Escape from the City playing on in her headset, no doubt, huh? Alright, but seriously, this is one of the images I couldn't make sense out of the first time around. However, there's two prominent speculations I've seen in the community. The first is that these are remnants of the Bionis shoulder that still drifted high in the air following the events of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. I think this is a more realistic case given that we can see clouds far below us, indicative of the extreme height we find Mio in, and not all of these Earth platforms are identical in their total area. The other speculation is that these smaller Earth pillars are the extremely dead and decayed husks of the Leftherian Archipelago jellyfish titan. Those titans were fairly healthy and youthful, so I can't imagine that they've decayed more rapidly than the gored-up Orion titan, but their circular pattern with that prominent one having a central earthen spire certainly adds a tiny bit of credence. There's also a clear example of a Leftherian jellyfish titan in another scene up ahead, pretty much refuting this speculation. The last thing I want to point up in this image is the floating metal facility in the left-hand side. Not much of a speculation per se, but the distinct blue makes me feel that it is a Kevis facility. The next image is one I talked about a little more in detail, and I'd just like to bring it back up. You see lots of trees, dense foliage and fog, and you got the quad wing in the background. This is obviously part of Machina Forest from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. This is followed up by a sandy area with some water to the side, a big old lizard dino creature in the middle, and lots of sand. I still stand by my take in my previous video that this is part of Aerith Sea, perhaps one of the more sandy areas that might have shifted around a little as the world rearranged, and the sea itself was shifted. A lot of this hunch is based on those spires in the upper part of the image, which were present on either side of the Aerith Sea. Other takes involve the inspiration of the desert area to the south of the capital of Torna from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but I am not inclined to agree based on the fact that Torna itself sank and decayed years before the ending events of that game. The final theory, and really this one just being my own, could we perhaps be on the large Leftherian jellyfish that was never visibly shown in Xenoblade Chronicles 2? Those jellyfish have spires as well that are more purplish, but their decay could have faded the color into standard rock. The water could then be explained as part of a smaller pond on the top of the jellyfish, and all of them have sand on their tops, and the bluish plant-like structure to the right of the image could perhaps be some kind of shell, also prevalent on some of the jellyfish titans in that game. The following image shows us another new monster being ridden by another new monster, closely resembling Sahagin of other RPGs. The area, however, unlike the previous scene, is undoubtedly Aerith Sea. The large body of water, with the ether-charged air over it, the high Antia slabs of metal dipping into the water, and again that coastline with a couple of those spires, it's 100% that same jaw drop in Aerith Sea we've all come to know and love. The next image actually is quite a lot to unpack, notwithstanding the large sea serpent. Most people, myself included, were first drawn to the fact that we are on a boat that looks pretty much to be player controlled. If this is the case, this will be our first time, mechs notwithstanding, that we can use vehicles in the Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade 2 world. It would be interesting if both factions will provide our characters with different modes of transportation. Perhaps Kev is with this boat, and Agnes with some sort of flying or land vehicle. Either way, very cool to see that they are happy to give the player new modes of travel and exploration. But that's not the only cool thing in this image. Remember how I said the Leftherian jellyfish titans are most assuredly not decayed? Well, that's easily one right there in the middle of the image, and it seems to have smashed up against a high Entia teleporter, perhaps indicating that the region's close to or a part of Aerith Sea, or maybe the teleporter drifted out after falling from one of the floating reefs, who knows. It's a strange piece of scenery where we see a fusion of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 structures. A second jellyfish titan can also be glimpsed at in the right hand side of the image, or its large tentacles in any case, which we're able to traverse on for the most part in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The next scene shows us whatever mechon that Lands was running past has awoken up and fires a beam presumably at the characters. What's the most intriguing part of this isn't, oh snap, the mechon is awake and firing, it's that there's a conduit-shaped structure on the main body of the mechon. It's already well known that the conduit is this world's term for the Zohar, an extremely prevalent and core item of unparalleled power known to exist in all of the Xeno games, and the only item that realistically ties Xenosaga, Xenogears, and Xenoblade together. I can't possibly imagine that this is anything more than a reference, or quote-unquote Easter egg, as the Zohar resembles a monolith, and Monolith Soft loves to put similar looking designs all over the place, most notably in the world of Xenoblade as the Aegis' cores in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and the Lifehold pods from Xenoblade Chronicles X. One heavy speculation I've only really seen from Luxon, in his own extremely in-depth analysis, is that the power of the Zohar is being manipulated in some way by the unknown third power to prolong the faction war. Another interesting note, also made by Luxon, was the circle on the machine is actively lit again, but it isn't even at half full, but almost completely depleted, maybe indicating it's on its last bit of juice as it seems to be going haywire. I'll be bringing up this detail one more time shortly. Either way, very cool and just a lot to unpack from this one small scene alone. But given the weight that the Zohar/conduit or any monolith-like structure bears in any of the Xeno games, I think it's warranted. Now, we got a picture of two little Nopon. I briefly talked about the dumb-looking afro on the blue one, but many people were quick to point out that these two almost have a quirky resemblance to Rex and Pyra. It'll be a little funny if this is their insert reference, but given that they have weapons, the boy a gun grapple hook looking thing, and the girl with what looks like a shield that Poppy Alpha used, there are many people who are also thinking that these two are going to be party members. Again, Luxon in his research was quick to point out that the boy is dressed in dark garb while the girl is in white with red sashes, a large indication that these two are associated with the different factions, but their physical closeness assumes that they are together regardless. There's also the distinct possibility that out of all the races in both games, the Nopon of all people would be able to find common ground, perhaps offering themselves as an independent mercantile faction. Very interesting stuff. Past this point, there are a couple of lines involved using the words clock and flame clock. While we know next to nothing, the general fan consensus alludes to the half rings or some such as we've seen throughout most of the trailer on the soldier tech and the machines. Perhaps when the clock ticks out, whatever it is connected to it will die or enter a stasis-like state like the mechs did. But what if these rings are full? A few weapons, notably the weapons of Mio, Yuni, and Senna, show not just a full circle, but a depiction of a snake eating its own tail, an image often referred to as Ouroboros, which has huge Xenogears implications that I'm just not going to get into. That being said, Ouroboros is most commonly seen as a symbol of eternity, or as a depiction of the cycle of life and death, rolling over constantly for eternity. Again, with life being the main theme and the principle of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it is going to be very interesting to see what will happen to a living person when they have an empty ring. And even in the next clip, where Mio and Noah are fighting what I believe is the Agnes mech, this is perhaps the most prominent and visible half-ring we've seen, and you can see that the light within the ring isn't entirely uniform in its size. It's growing more in width as it reaches the halfway mark. If these rings are meant to be clocks, as Yuni and Noah bring up, and as some are speculating, That can mean these devices serve multiple purposes, and they facilitate some aspect of life in an unknown manner. Almost done with the scenes, so let's keep up at it, huh? Next up, we have a striking and beautifully grown-up Melia Antiqua, the crowned sovereign of all the remaining High Entia. Given her imposing stance, it is assumed that she is the Keves leader. She's wearing a dark-colored dress seemingly inspired from her future connected design, and her hair in the back is grown, giving the impression that a significant amount of time has passed since we've last seen her. What is interesting here is she's chosen to hide her face behind a mask. It was believed she hid her face behind a mask as part of the old nobility, in part due to her half-Hom's bloodline. So it's interesting to see, as the new leader, she's now not only governing the High Entia but all races, that she still chooses to hide her face behind a mask. What is also interesting is that she says, Ouroboros abhor this world. This likely refers to someone who has a completed ring clock thing or whatever, perhaps that are able to discern something that they otherwise wouldn't know if they didn't have the full ring, causing them to hate the world in some sort of aspect, maybe even realizing why the two factions are fighting or whoever the identity of this mysterious third party could be. We then see who is actually Nia, yep, not Mio, but actually Nia, wearing garb closely resembling her blade uniform, but with an even more dignified design. Notably, she has several sashes similar to Mio's, and the corrupted core crystal is still present on her chest. What is unknown is why she's choosing to wear a mask like Melia is, as unlike Melia, Nia has never worn a mask or had reason to. Could it perhaps be that something has happened to both Nia and Melia, and influenced the both of them to hide their faces? And one other thing, since Nia is most assuredly alive, where on Ionios' drum mark? Unless something happened in the past that would have caused him to revert to his core form, like the absence of ether or perhaps a blow powerful enough to damage the visible portion of his core, we can assume he is alive somewhere, not just in the trailer. Nia says they must be erased without a trace. Unless she also mentions Ouroboros directly prior to this statement, we can assume Melia and Nia are talking at different points in the game, and they may not even be talking about the same subject. She could very well be telling another force that isn't Ouroboros must be erased. I firmly believe, however, and I think most people can agree, that while there is a war, and while one of these two may get injured or even die, which I earnestly hope doesn't end up being the case, nobody expects either of these two to actually be evil or wanting to commit to do horrible acts. I also have no doubt that the true enemy is a higher power staying out of sight until our protagonists are exposed to either what Ouroboros see, or by whatever they learn by going to the decayed remains of Uriah. Let's move on to our final scene, where we see the main art setup and background that we're going to see for the game. Noah and Mio arrive at the hill closely overlooking the wounded and decayed Uriah Titan, as well as the Sword of the Mechonis. Getting to Uriah is going to likely be where we are going to learn the truths of Ionios. This is where we're done with our analysis of the trailer, and I'd like to talk about a few prominent theories as well as my own speculations. Let's start out with the setup piece. First, if there's ever going to be a reference of Rex if he's truly passed away, I firmly believe we are going to likely learn about it at Uriah. What do I mean by this? Well, I see a lot of people speculating how Uriah was wounded, but I barely see anyone talking about where the wound is located. Think back to the geography of the Uriah Titan. I have no doubt in my mind that whatever caused the wound destroyed, perhaps even specifically targeted, Garfont village. Rex, being the leader of the Garfont mercenaries, likely could have been living there for a good part of his life, assuming he didn't just return to his hometown in Lotharia. The second thing, I really don't buy that the Mechonis sword is what slashed the Uriah Titan in two. I think it's a distractor from whatever really did the damage, perhaps the third party. Also, when the sword was cleaved in half during the second battle between the Bionis and the Mechonis, there isn't much of a part of the sword left that could reliably cleave along the length of the Titan. Next up, let's talk about Melia. Why? Well, because she's probably the best shot we have of knowing just how much time has passed since the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 came together. Melia is 88 years old during the original campaign, and 89 during Future Connected. It is commonly accepted by fans that High Entia age about 6 times as slowly as compared to humans or their Hom's counterpart. If Melia at any point provides her age, we can math it up to get an approximation. Given that she physically doesn't look significantly old and still relatively youthful, we can assume that unless something has happened to drastically further her lifespan, Again, the theme of life coming in again. Not all too much time has actually happened since the worlds merged. If this is her actual age and it is not enhanced in some way, we can assume that every one of the Hyentia or Machina race that was around Melia's age is more than alive, including Tyrea, Vinea, and Linata, and also Tion. This could be muddled somewhat by the fact that although Klaus's two halves perished around the same time in Xenoblade 1's world still went on without seeing any changes for a while. We wouldn't have Future Connected taking place a year later otherwise. Even though the two halves died and the conduit left this dimension, it took over a year for the Titans to come and merge with the land of Xenoblade 1. We can't use Nia's age either, as being a flesh eater, her lifespan is really unclear, especially given the fact that Nia is capable of incredible healing skills at the cellular level. Theoretically, Nia can live as long as she wants, if I'm getting extremely scientific about it. The next thing I want to bring up is the distinct option to not show Pyra and Mithra. There are several fan theories I've seen regarding these two. The first is that they both chose to live their lives with Rex until he passed away, and then simply wished to pass away with him, aligning up with a sentiment that Pyra had towards the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The second is that, to continue the duty of the three Aegises, and keep the Trinity processor functioning and operational, either Pyra or Mithra became the new Logos, and Alvis will somehow connect with this. Speaking of Alvis, there's wild speculation that when he disappeared to travel elsewhere, he has ended up being corrupted by an outside force and returned to the world of Xenoblade, and is presumed the third party. This could align with how he saw a vision saying everyone would be walking together hand in hand at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. But if he's become corrupted in some sort of way, he could very well be destroying and altering his own vision. The last thing with Pyra and Mithra, and probably just the safest pick, is that they are simply out there somewhere and they haven't shown up in this trailer. Either way, if Mia is indeed hurting people in this war, I doubt the two of them would be silent about their friend becoming a war figure. Next up is the idea of threes. In Xenoblade 1, there is Zanza's Trinity and the three Monados. In Xenoblade 2, there is the Trinity Processor. In this game, we can assume that there are at least three factions, Keves Agnus, and the third unknown party. It'd be interesting to see what else can be placed in the pattern of threes that Xenoblade series loves to pull off. Lastly, and something I haven't seen anyone really talk about, is the use and role of Ether in this new world. Sure, Agnus uses it as part of their tech, but I'm not talking about that specifically. Ether is the source of all life according to Melia, and it's been represented in both games to sustain it. Ether is largely used as a fuel source for Hom's tech, but some Nopon and Hyentia can pull from their surrounding. Ether is a direct life source of both the Bionis and the Mechonis. Aerith is short for erythrocyte, or red blood cell, which humans obviously need to sustain their life. After the events of Mechonis Core, I always called the Aerith Sea the Blood Sea, which was also suitable because it was flooded with ether to revert the Hyentia into Telethia, who by the way are not in this trailer at all. If Tion is indeed alive, or maybe it's because of Tion, I'm sure that the lore of the Telethia has changed drastically, hopefully for the better. But I'm getting sidetracked. Anyway, the point is ether is synonymous with life. On the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 side of things, everything in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is far more attuned to ether. Drivers constantly link their blades through it. A blade will die and revert to its core if there is no ether around it. Ether-based technology and studies are prevalent in both games. With Xenoblade Chronicles 3 having such a focus on life, as Takahashi stated, I can't help but wonder what roles they will have ether play around with. And that is finally all I have to say about the trailer that I know about, or what theories have popped up so far on the internet that are plausible, using only prior Xenoblade games as a reference. I know this was quite a lengthy video, far more expansive than what I originally envisioned, and clearly larger than my quick analysis video. But that just goes to show how much love and passion I have for the Xenoblade series. But please tell me, what do you think? Do you have your own thoughts on anything I brought up, or is there something you think should be interpreted a little differently? Let me know in the comments below. You can also reach me on my Twitter, where I am far more active on a daily basis. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking it and subscribing to my channel, where I plan to keep talking about and playing many different video games, particularly those I resonate with and love deeply. Thank you very much for your time, and as always, have a great day.